So I'm here to talk about all of this unsettling social injustice that's happening across our country and how it affects me and my family and me as a board member. And I have to say, it makes me think of when I was pretty young in the 60s, growing up in Maryvale. And every Saturday we had to go to the laundromat, and there was a Circle K next door. And my mom would give us a quarter so that we could go next door, buy our comic books and our penny candy so that we would have something to do while we're sitting at the laundromat. And we stood there at the counter to pay. And the clerk started waiting on everybody else that was an adult ahead of us. And my brother and I got very uncomfortable, and I became very insecure. And I'm like, what do I do? So finally, I said something and said, excuse me, we need to pay for these things. The clerk disgruntledly rolled his eyes, took our money, and shooed us out of the store. So I just remember how insufficient, less than, and embarrassed this clerk made me feel as a young child. Fast forward to the 70s, and I'm waiting in line. It was Christmas time, and you know how it is at Christmas, there's 50 people waiting in line. And the clerk was, waiting on everybody and not very happy because they're working during Christmas. But I can remember waiting in line, and there were several people in front of me. And a couple in front of me was this young man who was obviously purchasing something for his mother, and he was about 10, almost the same age that I was. And of course I had those flashbacks, And so the young man, is finally his turn, puts the stuff up on the counter, and the clerk looks at the next person in back of him and takes that adult's merchandise first, completely ignoring the young man. I instantly felt re-victimized. I was instantly humiliated again, and I was that 8-year-old little girl at the Circle K at the counter trying to pay for my comic book. And then I became angry because the clerk then waited on 3 other people and still ignoring this young man. Well, then it was my turn. I get up there and I put my stuff on the counter. And I said, excuse me, this young man was before me. The clerk looked at me, rolled her eyes, and said, I don't care, and started to process my order. And I said, no, wait a minute. This young man was ahead of me, and his money is as good as mine, and he's waited here very respectfully. And at this time, I'm boiling. So I insisted that the clerk ring him out first. So she did, begrudgingly. And the young man looked at me and said, thank you. So that was my turn to pay. And me being a little irritated, I decided to stall because I knew that there was a big long line of people in back of me. Waited a good 5 minutes. The clerk was getting annoyed. I could feel the tension in back of me building up and these daggers going in the back of my shirt. And so the clerk says, can I ring you up? Are you going to get these? And I looked at her and I said, no, I don't think I need to shop here anymore. So I left my stuff on the counter and I walked away feeling pretty proud of myself. And as I walked away, I looked back at the line, and it was all Caucasian people, white people, men, women, children, didn't matter. And I remember thinking, you know what, if the store is going to discriminate against somebody because they're a child, then I don't need to go there. And that's how I took it, because I was looking at me as a child and kind of reliving that being victimized and feeling less than. And I remember telling myself I wasn't going to let anybody else feel that way because it's horrible. So I look back on it now, and when I look at the young man walking out the door, I see it differently now, because that young man was a Black child. And there was more to it for him than just being a child trying to make a purchase for his mom. I think it was because he was a child of color. And for whatever reason, that clerk had some biases, and it came across. But I was proud of myself that in my own way, I was able to protest. And I think that as we have these conversations in our kitchens and with our children, we need to remember, I need to remember, that our children are watching. And the only way we're going to turn this social injustice around is by setting the example for our children and any other child who's watching us, regardless of where they are or where they're from. And to me, I take that responsibility seriously, because I don't think it's right for us to discriminate against somebody because of the color of their skin, or because of their socioeconomic status, or because they're a child and not an adult. And as I have these conversations in the kitchen, which is our conference room these days, we can be like John Lewis, and we can cause some good trouble. We don't need to be confrontational, but we can certainly take a stand when we see that somebody is being treated less than. And so we decided the last weekend or so that whenever you fill those forms out, whether it's driver's license or doctor's offices, and they always ask for you for your race, we're never comfortable having to check Caucasian and white. A lot of times I leave it blank because none of their business, first of all. But my husband and I and our sons were like, I think we're going to start checking other and put down human, because that's what it's about. So I hope this gives you an understanding of where I'm coming from and how I think that we can make a difference for tomorrow if we set the example and stand up to when we see somebody treating less than. And let's check human. Thanks for listening.